We have a person in our company whom I call the Laughing Man. His name is Cooper, and whenever he sees me, he bursts into laughter. However, it's not just a cheerful laugh. It's as if he's laughing to death, struggling to hold back his laughter. At first, I was taken aback, and as time went on, I started feeling uneasy. It was because he wasn't close to me, and we had never had a deep conversation. I discussed it with people around me, but strangely, they all said the same thing. Cooper? I've never seen him laugh even once. He's expressionless every day. Next time he laughs, take a picture. I want to see how he laughs. I was genuinely puzzled. Was he only laughing at me? Over time, I asked Cooper why he was only laughing when he saw me, but he closed his eyes and said, I see you. The way you react is so funny. He swung his arms, as if swinging a baseball bat. I asked him what he saw, but he didn't say a word. It sent chills down my spine, but there was nothing I could do. After that, he was often caught secretly watching me from a distance, struggling to hold back his laughter, and I got angry with him, but he couldn't help but laugh more. But I discovered that he never laughed when he was with other people. Only when he looked at me did he laugh brightly. It really gave me the creeps. Then one day, I was working late and alone in the office. When I tried to leave, Cooper was standing in front of me, holding a baseball bat. I shouted at him, asking what he was doing, but he just laughed without saying a word. He slowly approached me, struggling to breathe because he was laughing so hard. Then he swung the baseball bat at me. I barely avoided it, but my arm was hit, and I groaned in pain. In response, he laughed even harder. Seizing the opportunity, I kicked him and ran away at full speed. He chased after me, but couldn't catch me. I immediately reported it to the police, and Cooper was arrested. But a while later, our company was turned upside down. It was revealed that Cooper had been arrested for murder. He had recently killed a neighbor and dumped the body. It was also revealed that he had attempted to murder and assault other people. One person, who barely survived from him, testified to the police, saying, He was always laughing, so I thought he was a good person, but in the end, when he hit me and burst into laughter, I realized that was the true meaning of his laughter. I was in complete shock. What was even more shocking was when a colleague who had been closest to Cooper in our company said this. Cooper once told me he has a habit of laughing when he sees the people he wants to kill. He said he can't help but laugh because imagining killing that person makes him feel so good. At that time, I thought it was just a joke. I never imagined it could be real. Thinking back now, it gives me chills to realize that I was close to him all this time. Fortunately, he never laughed at me. I'm really grateful. But I used to force jokes to make him laugh. It sends shivers down my spine to think about it now. After hearing his words, my heart sank. All those moments when he looked at me and laughed came flooding back.
I met someone who looked just like me while traveling one day. He looked so much like me that I believed he was a twin. We both stopped and looked at each other in the face for a few seconds, and he asked me, "Who are you?" I couldn't say anything in shock and only looked at his face. He also looked at me in the face and continued to look incredulous. I ran away with an indescribable discomfort, but that night, I had a dream that my body burned down and turned into ashes. And when I woke up in the morning, my whole body began to crack and discharge. As time went by, my body began to hurt more and more. Gradually, it became difficult to breathe, and it became difficult to move as the arms and legs hardened. I was lost in thought. I heard I'd die if I met a doppelganger. Am I dying? I ended up visiting a famous fortune teller who was surprised to see me and said, "You were born by God's mistake. God is trying to turn you back into nothingness." I said I wanted to live, and the fortune teller shook his head and said there was no way. I went back stunned, and after that day, my body began to dry out like a dying tree. As the day went by, I became senile. My back was bent, my skin cracked, and blood began to leak out. Even after visiting a doctor, he said there was no cure. saying it was a strange disease with an unknown cause. I shouted at the sky, "God, you created me and now you're trying to get rid of me?" I wanted to live somehow, so I exercised for 6 hours a day and took care of all kinds of vitamins and health foods. Fortunately, I started to feel better, and I was able to slow down the speed of my body's breakdown. Then one day, I had a dream again. I saw a person who looked like me lying down in the form of a lump of ash, because his whole body was burned. I woke up screaming, and now I'm in better shape than ever before. Surprisingly, after that, I gradually recovered my health and gradually returned to a healthy body. I don't know what happened. Did God change his mind? Or was it all just a coincidence? But one question remains in my mind. Where is the person who looked like me now? Is he alive?
This is what I experienced when I was 17. At that time, I was in good shape because I mastered many sports, such as boxing and wrestling. But one day, Alexander, a notorious delinquent at my school, asked me for a fight. I was bewildered and said, "If I hit you, you'll go straight to heaven." But I shouldn't have said this. He suddenly shouted in anger, "I'll chew you to pieces, eat you up, and then take a shit." I was perplexed, but I realized there was nothing I could do. He ran up to me and punched me, and I punched him back as I was enraged. He was knocked down to the floor by my fist, and blood started dripping from his nose. I tried to help him up, saying I'm sorry and let's stop this, but he grabbed me, knocked me over, and started beating me. I was infuriated and punched him badly. He fell down again and couldn't get up as he was in pain. I kept yelling at him to stop, but he was already half mad. He got up again and shouted as he approached me, "Let's fight!" I shouted, "Please stop! You're gonna die if you keep doing that." He said, smirking, "Of course, one of us must die." He pounced on me, and I picked him up and pinned him to the ground. He broke his neck, got up with his neck broken, and ran back at me. I tripped him with my leg, and he broke his arm as he fell down. He pounced on me with his arms broken as well. I yelled at him to stop, but he ran at me screaming, "I'll stop when you die!" I kicked him really hard, and he flew 10 feet away. He fell to the floor and tried to get up, but his whole body seemed to be broken, and it seemed that he couldn't move. I called the police right at that moment. The police arrived, and he was taken away in an ambulance. He was hospitalized and taken to the intensive care unit. I was injured, as I was beaten up by him as well, but there were no major injuries. And after a while, I received another text message from him. There were 2 words written on that message: "Let's fight." I eventually called him, apologized, and told him I gave up. Then there was silence for a few seconds, and I heard him whispering, "Let's fight." My whole body trembled. He didn't listen to anything I said. His only goal was to fight me. I blocked his number. After a while, I received a letter. In the letter, once again, 2 words were written: "Let's fight." A few days later, I heard a knock and looked outside to find Alexander standing there. He was limping with a cast on his arm. I called the police, but he continued to hover around my neighborhood. I ended up moving, and I haven't heard from him since. Years passed, and I ran into my old high school friend Luke, and while talking with him, I happened to hear about Alexander. After he fought with me, he kept challenging other friends at school to fight, and most of the kids refused and avoided him, but one of them, a friend named Nicholas, accepted the fight, and in the end, the 2 of them fought until Alexander killed him with his bare hands. In the end, Alexander went to prison. I was horrified. He had meant everything he ever said. If I hadn't suppressed him then, I wouldn't be alive now.
This is what happened to my little brother, Luke. He had a habit of consistently moving his eyes. just like someone who is so insecure. When I asked him why he does that, he replied, "The demons keep putting their faces against me to make eye contact with me, so I need to keep avoiding their eyes." However, there was nothing in front of him. He continued to move his eyes while eating. When he was walking down the street, when he was talking with somebody, he kept looking away as if someone was in front of him. I thought to myself that he was clearly suffering from a mental illness and recommended that he go to a psychiatrist, but he stubbornly refused to, saying that there are 10 demons hovering in front of him. Eventually, our family all agreed to send him to a psychiatric hospital. He ran riot and struggled to get out, but the doctor administered a tranquilizer to him and he fell fast asleep. However, this was when the incident happened. A few hours later, he opened his eyes and suddenly screamed as he grabbed his eyes. "Ah! Our eyes met!" He rolled around in pain. Then he suddenly jumped up and groped his own body and face, shouting in a loud, monstrous voice, "I finally got in!" He was smiling, turning up only the whites of his eyes. I was so shocked and was perplexed at what had happened, and so were the doctors and nurses. He continued talking in a monstrous voice. "This body is mine now. This body is now Satan's. This body is now the house of demons!" I shouted in anger. "Go to hell, you evil!" He laughed, saying, "Peter, what's the trouble? Hell is a nice place." After all, we called the priest and he performed exorcisms. The priest said Luke was born with eyes that could see demons, and he said that he must have seen demons all his life. How hard it must have been. Tears ran down my face. The priest performed an exorcism with his eyes covered up with a ribbon tied around his head. Luke yelled at the priest as he was tied to the bed. "Look into my eyes. If I enter your holy body and commit a sin, how will God respond?" When the priest sprinkled holy water on him, he let out a monstrous scream, and smoke came out with a burning sound. After a long exorcism, Luke finally fainted with his head dropped, and the priest said that no more demons would come near him. Luke woke up and surprisingly, he no longer looked away. He regained his composure. However, even after that, every once in a while, as he walked down the street, he would point somewhere and say there is an evil spirit. But he never looked at that direction. When I looked where he pointed, nothing was there. I asked him, "Is there really such a thing as a demon in this world?" And then he said, "Yes, there are many. Every day they hover around in front of people's eyes and whisper in their ears. There's also one in front of you right now. It's struggling to get your attention. Peter, I'll tell you one thing. If you see something strange in front of you, never look at it. You just have to pretend you didn't see it. Promise me."
Here is the story about the creepy cinema I went to. I was 15 when this story takes place. My mom and I planned on going to the mall and watching a movie. Since our favorite mall was far, we decided to watch a movie at a place nearby that we hadn't been to. We found a mall named Star Mall Alabang. This mall came from the Philippines, and there's been a crazy rumor about it having been built on top of a really old cemetery. We went inside, heading straight to the ticket booths. The ticket booth line was empty. I looked around and noticed we were the only ones there. At first, I didn't actually mind because that meant we would be first in line and would probably get the best seats. My mom and I hurried through the halls to get to our theater because our movie was about to start. Both of us expected there to be a few people in the movie theater, and yet there was no one in the theater. Every single seat was empty. What made this situation even more chilling was when the lights dimmed and it was only us in there. We couldn't handle how eerie it was, so we ran back out of the theater. Then, to our relief, we saw two girls walking through the doors of the theater we were just in. We headed back into the theater feeling more comfortable, knowing there were at least 2 other people there. We picked out our seats near the 2 girls and sat patiently waiting for the movie. While the trailers began playing, we didn't pay much attention, but I remember hearing a few people come in and sit behind us. I even heard a few whispers and chatter at that time. My mom remarked that it was silly that we had been so paranoid, and that maybe no one was in the theater yet because we were very early. This is when the story takes a creepy turn. The movie started, so as should be expected, my mother, the 2 girls, and I were giving the movie our full attention. After most of the movie had played, I needed to go pee. Despite having heard many people join the theater with us, I still felt scared. I asked my mom to go with me because I didn't want to go alone. She said, "Just go alone. The washroom is near." The movie was probably about to finish, so I figured I could just wait to go to the bathroom. I ain't gonna miss the best part, you know? I tried to hold it, but I couldn't. If I waited for the end of the movie, I'd definitely pee my pants. For sure. I moved through the row we were in so that I could get to the aisle and start making my way down the stairs to the exit. Maybe I was being nosy, or maybe it was just out of habit, but I decided to look around and see if anyone else in the crowd was enjoying the movie. What I saw, or rather what I didn't see, stopped me in my tracks. There was no one at the cinema besides us. I had a mini heart attack because we literally just heard a few people going in earlier, and I could hear their talking too. As in, we are the only people that's been watching. I was too freaked out to go to the bathroom, so I hurried back to my seat. I would hold my pee until the movie was finished. When the movie finished and the lights were turned back on, the 2 girls and my mom were talking about the movie. You know, the usual, giving their opinions and stuff as I sat frozen in my seat. It wasn't until they turned around to check the seats around us that they also realized that we were completely alone. "Where's the others?" they asked. I stayed quiet because I do not want to talk about it.
There was a middle-aged man among my neighbors who had been practicing martial arts for a very long time. He practiced by striking trees in his front yard every day and would break bricks with his bare hands. But one day, he was found dead in the front yard of his house. What was even more shocking was that he had suffocated to death with his fist stuck in his throat. His jaw was completely dislocated, something that couldn't have happened without compulsion. But there were no traces of someone having done it. The whole neighborhood was in shock, and the police focused on the investigation, but there was no progress. One day, while I was taking a rest at home, I heard a voice outside. "Please, open the door." When I heard that voice, I was walking over to the door and opening it before I knew it. It felt like an order I couldn't resist. In front of the door, there was a man dressed up with eyeball-shaped earrings, necklaces, and rings, and he was staring at me with his eyes wide open. I was startled, and at the same time, a tingling sensation ran through my brain and spine. Then suddenly, I became completely exhausted and started to be in a semi-conscious condition. He then said, "Please don't stare back at my face for a long time. Roll your eyes back." Then my pupils started to go up. I was so startled that I tried to look down, but it didn't work. It seemed to be out of my will. I screamed. Then he said, "Please don't make a sound," and my voice suddenly did not come out. I was standing there with an upward glance, feeling great pain. Even though I had my pupils upwards to the extent where I couldn't roll my eyes further, he kept saying, "More. Roll your eyes more, please." Tears flowed like a waterfall as I felt tremendous pain, as if my pupils were being ripped off. I barely begged him for help in a shrill voice. he said. "Are you still able to talk? If so, bite your tongue, please." Then suddenly I was biting my tongue with my teeth. I tried to open my mouth with all my might, but it didn't work. I felt great pain. Only then did I realize how the martial artist had died. He said, "Now bite your tongue until it cuts off." Suddenly, someone shouted from behind, "Hands up!" It turned out that the police had been patrolling the neighborhood and had followed after a suspicious-looking man. The moment I heard his voice, the numbness of my body wore off. The man turned around and looked at the police and said, "Please drop the gun." Then the police dropped the gun he was holding onto the floor. He didn't pick up the gun and stood still with an idiotic expression on his face. At that very moment, I attacked the man from behind and put a headlock on him. But when he said, "Your arm is getting weak," he smoothly slipped away as my arm weakened, and I was perplexed. He pointed at me and said to the officer, "Point your gun at this man." Then the police picked up the gun and pointed it at me. The man said to the police, "If he moves, the trigger will be pulled," and quietly disappeared. I couldn't move, and the police stood still for a long time, his body stiff. After the man had completely disappeared, the police dropped his gun and collapsed onto the floor, devastated. We couldn't believe what we'd been through, and since then, the police devoted all of their energy to catch the enigmatic man. And after a while, I heard news that the man had been caught. It turned out that the man had the ability to hypnotize people in 1 second. He had used that technique to play with people like toys. It turned out that there were hundreds of other people who had been harassed by him, but no one could report it because he had hypnotized them so that they could not report it to the police. Instead of sending him to prison, the government reportedly took him to use him for special tasks. No one knows what particular mission he is used for. But since he is such a dangerous person, whenever even high-ranking government officials meet him, they are reportedly accompanied by dozens of special forces.
Yesterday, a 5th missing person has been filed in Ville-Same. The 5th missing person, Ella, was also a 5'2" tall girl. This has proved that speculation that the kidnapper only targets females who are exactly 5'2" tall is true. The families of the victims are enduring hellish days as no missing person has been found yet. The photos shown on the screen now are the missing persons. If you have witnessed them, please file a report by calling the number below.
There has already been a 5th disappearance in our neighborhood. The kidnapper seems to be the same person. This is because all 5 victims were girls exactly 5'2" tall. The police speculated that the kidnapper was a pervert obsessed with the figure 5'2". Investigations continued on the serial disappearance cases that lasted for several months, but the whereabouts of the missing persons were unknown, and there was no one who witnessed a kidnapping taking place. Rather, the village was quiet and peaceful.
Kaylee, come home right after school. You must never walk around alone. If you need me, call me anytime and I'll pick you up.
My mother, who was watching the news beside me, said with a worried face,
Mom, don't worry too much. I'm 5'3" tall. Don't say that. You should always be careful. All 5 missing people were exactly 5'2", as if they were measured with a ruler. So don't worry too much, and I'll be careful too.
I said calmly to reassure my mother, but I was scared as well. 2 days later, I was walking with my friends on my way home from school, and many police cars and ambulances were parked at the entrance to the village's forest, and people were carrying dead bodies covered with white cloth on stretchers. The bodies of the missing victims were found buried here and there in the forest. The bodies of 4 people were already decomposed and turned into white bones, and the search team was surprised when they found Ella's body, who disappeared 3 days ago and had not yet decomposed. This was because the body did not have a single piece of skin left. The police judged that the culprit was likely to be a butcher who professionally trimmed meat based on the elaborately peeled skin off the body. So, the butchers living in the village were investigated, but the investigation was at a standstill because no evidence was found. As the investigation intensified, as if the culprit became more cautious, no more victims occurred, and several months passed. The incident settled down, but 5'2" tall females never went out alone, and there were even families moving to other neighborhoods to protect their daughters. A few days later, on my way home from school, after parting with my friends, a woman came out of her yard and greeted me.
Hi, do you live here? I'm Luna and I live here.
Hello, I'm Kaylee. I live in this town too. Nice to meet you.
Kaylee, it's so dangerous these days because of the serial killings. Would it be okay if you wander around alone like this?
I'm scared, but I'm 5'3" tall, so I just roam around thinking it's going to be okay.
But you have to be careful. I have a daughter named Mia and I'm worried a lot these days.
Luna said, pointing her finger at the window on the second floor of her house. She said,
That's Mia's room. She's 5 feet 2 inches tall, so I don't let her go out at all. In fact, she saw you pass by through her window and begged me to play with you, so I came out to ask you to play with her.
I looked at the window on the second floor at which Luna was pointing, and there was a girl standing by the window, looking down at where I was.
Does Mia know me?
Yeah, it's been a long time since she hasn't gone out, so it's her daily routine to look out the window, but I guess she wanted to be friends with you who passes by every day. Would you like to play with Mia today? I've also baked a delicious apple pie.
Yes, I'd like to.
I followed Luna into the house. Her house had a charming interior with floral wallpaper and pretty props, and there was a wooden table in the middle of the living room. Luna seemed to be working on sewing until now, as on a mint-colored sewing machine, there was a dress that was half-laced. Luna smiled when she saw me looking at the sewing machine and said,
I was just making Mia's dress. I make my daughter's dresses on my own.
The dress is so pretty.
If you become friends with Mia, I'll make yours too. Come on, follow me to the second floor.
Luna went to the second floor and knocked on Mia's door.
Mia, I've brought you a friend.
When she opened the door, there was Mia sitting on her bed, shaking her hand without saying a word. Her head bowed as she was shy. I smiled brightly and introduced myself to Mia, who was wearing a bucket hat and a black dress.
Hello, Mia. I'm Kaylee. I came by because you wanted to be friends with me.
Then Mia answered in a small voice.
Hello, Kaylee. Thanks for coming to my room.
Then Luna happily looked at us and said,
Oh, you two have fun. Mommy will bring you girls apple pie.
As Luna went down the stairs, Mia asked me,
Kaylee, aren't you afraid of the outer world?
I'm scared, but I'm 5'3" tall, so I just walk around bravely. Mia, I've heard you're 5'2" tall. Since you can't go out alone, I think it would be frustrating.
Then Mia put her arm across mine and took me to a large mirror in the room and said,
I'm 5'3" tall now too. That's why I haven't had clothes that fit me lately.
Just as she said, Mia and I standing side by side in front of the mirror were the same height. However, when I looked closely at Mia's face and body, something was strange. She was so grotesque, as she had skin sewn here and there, like a stuffed toy. I couldn't ask her directly about it because I might hurt Mia's feelings, so I just glanced at her. Mia's face was twisted as well, with her skin sewn together as if it had been patched up. Only then did I realize that Mia was no ordinary person. Mia looked at our reflection in the mirror and said with a satisfied smile,
Kaylee, I like you so much. It's apple pie time. I'll bring Mom.
Mia went downstairs to get the apple pie, and I had a foreboding feeling about Mia's eccentric appearance. So I sneaked around her room while she was away. I was surprised when I opened Mia's closet. Strange leathers were hanging on 4 hangers, and when I took one of them out and spread it on the floor, it looked as if a human skin had been peeled off. The arms, legs, and torso were cut so that it could be worn like a suit, and a mask with the face and hair of a person's scalp had been peeled off, was also hung in her closet.
Ah! What is this?
I was startled, and I hurled the unknown leather, thinking I should get out of this creepy house quickly. As I hurried out of Mia's room and went down the stairs, I heard Mia and Luna's voice from downstairs.
She's the same height as me. She has a pretty face, so I like her. Hurry up and make me new clothes made out of Kaylee.
There weren't any clothes for you to wear because you grew up, but this is good news. Mommy will make you a pretty one this time as well.
I saw the mother and daughter walking upstairs through the cracks of the stairs. Luna had a large plastic bag and a sharp kitchen knife in her hand, and Mia, who was behind her, had cutting scissors in her hand. I was startled and went back into the room and locked the door. After a while, the mother and daughter found that the door was locked and started knocking on the door.
Kaylee? Kaylee, open the door. I brought some apple pie.
I kept my mouth shut in fear. Then I heard Mia's voice saying,
Kaylee, what are you doing? Let's play. Open the door.
When I didn't say anything, Luna said to Mia,
Mommy will bring the keys.
I hurriedly looked around the room and found that the only way to escape was to jump out the window. When I opened the window and looked down, it was too high for me to jump out. Suddenly, the door burst open and Mia jumped in and pulled me by the waist. As I writhed myself, Luna swung a kitchen knife from behind and I collapsed on the spot. Ah! Seeing me bleeding from a huge back wound and suffering in pain, Mia hollered with a mad expression.
What are you doing? You cut my new clothes! Are you crazy?
Mia screamed for a while and sat down sobbing.
It's because of you, Mom! You ruined it all! Now I have no more clothes to wear! Look at this! My feet are sticking out because my clothes are too short!
Mia's ankle protruded from under the leather on the sole of her foot. There was another foot, and the red skin with dead skin cells and cracks all over was so disgusting that it could not be considered human skin. Luna said, comforting Mia.
Oh, it's all Mommy's fault. I was in a hurry thinking she'd jump out the window. Sorry, Mia.
Now what? There are so many cops that I can't even get new clothes anymore.
Then Luna looked down at me, pondering, and then said to Mia,
Mia, I've got an idea. Why don't we wait until the wound is healed and then skin her?
Mia's face immediately brightened and she grinned. The mother and daughter taped my wrists and ankles and each carried my legs and torso and went down to the basement. Lights in the basement, I saw a neatly organized cutting room with bright white lights. On the large work table, a belt was installed to bind limbs, and surgical tools and cutting supplies were placed on the table. They laid me down on the work table, brought antiseptic and bandages, and started treating my wound. That's how I was locked in the cutting room until the wound healed and their treatment to obtain my leather began. The mother and daughter brought soup, bread, and water and fed me, applied medicine to the wounds frequently, and tied my limbs to the work table during the rest of the time.
Look at this, Kaylee. You've become so famous.
The devil, like Mia, would often show me news by holding her tablet PC in front of my eyes. On the news, with an exasperated voice, the anchorman was saying that a sixth missing person had occurred, along with my picture, which was followed by my mother crying out for help to find me. When I saw my mother on the news, I burst into tears and begged Mia to get me out of here, but there was no use. As time passed, scabs formed on the deep wounds and new flesh began to come out. The fact that the new flesh was coming out meant that my death was not far away. Mia looked at my wound on my back and smiled broadly.
Mom, the scab is about to fall off. The new skin is coming out. I think I can make new clothes now.
Yes, that's true. I guess I have to start cutting. Mia, could you take off your clothes and lie down?
Mia took off her black dress and then started taking off her suit made of human leather as well. Then the cracked red skin she had hidden under the suit, the shape of her eyes, nose, and mouth, which were unrecognizable, were revealed. Then Mia lied on top of me, and Luna took her measuring tape and began taking her measurements. I shouted for my life while being crushed by Mia, but they seemed to think of me as nothing more than leather for tailor-made clothes. Then I heard the doorbell outside. Luna tilted her head in bewilderment and said to Mia,
There's no one who'd come home. Just keep an eye on Kaylee so she doesn't scream.
She hurried out to the front door, and Mia whispered as she thrust a sharp cutting shear into my neck.
Shh! Kaylee, be quiet or I'll stab you ruthlessly in the neck with this thing.
I knew very well that Mia could never hurt my body. Help me! When I cried out, Mia, startled, clamped my mouth shut, and I bit her fingers as hard as I could. I screamed once more when she collapsed, grasping her fingers.
Help me! There's someone in the basement!
Shortly after, the cutting room door burst open and the police rushed in.
Kaylee?
Yes, it's me!
The police freed me and helped my way out, but Mia, who had fallen on the floor, rushed at the police with cutting scissors and swung at them. She shouted,
Don't take my clothes! No, I don't have any clothes I can wear!
Surprised, the police shot her, and Mia collapsed and died on the spot. Then, Luna, who was being held by the police outside, screamed,
Mia! My baby! What did you guys do to my daughter?
Leaving behind Luna's outcry, I got out of the hellish house, got into the ambulance, and was able to meet my parents again at the hospital.
A long series of murders came to an end when a sixth missing person was dramatically rescued from the perpetrator's house. The killer's name is Luna, a middle-aged woman who has worked as a tailor all her life. It turned out that she lured girls of the same size into her house, murdered them, and skinned them into suits for her daughter who had a rare skin disease.
This happened to me 25 years ago. I had just dropped out of college and was looking to stretch my legs and get a new job. Well, that turned out to be much harder than expected. As a college dropout, I knew I wasn't going to find much. However, I managed to get a job at the gas station on Route 52. It was very far away from, really, anything. The closest town was 20 miles away. The owner was quiet, kept to himself. The place was a dump, and the pay was scarce. One night, August 15th, the owner had just left, leaving me in charge for the night shift. Even I had goosebumps that night. It was quiet. Peaceful, you may say. However, none the more dramatic. Fog covered the one road that led to nowhere, and there wasn't a car in sight. I was just about to close up for the night when a man entered the store. That wasn't very odd, seeing as I had gotten a few customers that night. However, the one thing that seemed out of the ordinary to me was that I never saw a car park in the parking lot. They would have had to walk 20 miles. But it occurred to me there was an abandoned house very close to the gas station. Maybe they found comfort there and needed a drink, so I carried on. I told them the station was closing soon. However, they just stood there, looking at the cigarettes on the counter. Seemed odd to me, because he was a rather old gentleman, and I wouldn't expect someone like that to continue smoking, even if he did it in his prime. I asked him if he wanted some. He said yes. That was all he would say that night. I asked him if that would be all. He had the cigarettes in his hand. However, rather than going to the register, he nodded his head and slowly stepped closer to the door. I tried to gather his attention. However, he didn't respond to me. He opened the door to go outside. I followed him from behind. I felt a chill when I did, one that I had never felt before. He began to walk into the street. However, I didn't follow him. The reason I didn't follow him is because a car was coming his way. I yelled out one more time, "Sir! Sir!" But he continued walking, slower than before. In fact, then he stopped. He turned around, and he looked right at me. He slowly put out his hand, with the car coming closer and closer towards him, and pointed it right at me. I had no time to react to that, however, because a few seconds later, the car sped up and ran into him. As I opened my eyes, expecting the old man to be in front of me, no one was there. In fact, I didn't even see the car in the distance. All that remained was a pack of cigarettes that sat there in the street. To say the least, that spooked me right out, but I truly knew no one would believe my story. So, I got myself back in shape, closed up the station, and went home. I slept with a light on that night. In the middle of the night, 12 I believe, I got a call. The owner of the gas station had passed away. I thought that was very unfortunate. He was rather nice to me. However, I will never forget these words. They told me he died in a car accident. Some random pedestrian walked in front of his car on the highway, causing him to swerve into the ditch. The owner's son took possession of the store and decided to close it down. He came up to me one day and asked if I knew anything about what happened. I just shook my head and walked away. I knew he'd never believe me. I eventually moved to New York, where I went back to school and got a job as a psychiatrist. Maybe if I can't relieve myself, I can relieve others from their torment. I've never spoken of that day since it occurred. However, I have decided to post it as sort of a message to others. The dead are alive, just not in the human form. As for the old man, I say goodbye, and I hope you finally got your cigarettes.
This is what happened when I was about 20 years old, when I used to work at a factory to earn a living. Life working at a factory was so boring, but I've got used to it as I forced myself to work there. I got to be friends with a colleague there, whose name was Devin. He had a shaggy beard and always smelled like alcohol. He always had horror books with him and enjoyed grotesque jokes. One day, when we were chatting, he said, "Hey, I just came up with an amazing idea." Then he showed me his notebook, on which dozens of people's names were written. Among them were the names of the factory manager and some of his colleagues. "I will kill them all within the next years. What do you think? Isn't it an awesome plan?" I thought he was joking, and so I said, "Are you having a hard time these days? You've lost your mind. I told you to take it easy." And then he said, "No, I really found the perfect way to murder. I can make a person disappear without a single trace." I told him, "Take a vacation and get some rest. I'll tell our boss for you." And I went to work, but he was looking at his notebook incessantly. A few days later, he looked much more joyful than usual. I asked him if there's any good news, and he invited me to his house, saying he had something to show me. When I arrived at his house, he said there is something great in the basement and took me there. In the basement, he put on gloves and goggles and opened up a large barrel. Smoke poured from the barrel, and he used a big pair of tongs to pull something out of it. "A bone," he said. "It takes a very long time to dissolve bodies, but it doesn't mean it's impossible. This means that it's possible to murder and not get caught by the police." My body started to tremble. Apparently, what he was holding was a bone of a human. He said, "Would you like to go inside this barrel too? And tell me how you feel when you're inside. I'm really curious. The pain of being dissolved. It is often said that being burnt is the most painful. How would that feel?" I asked everyone to tell me, but they wouldn't say anything if they go inside. Then he suddenly grabbed me and struggled to get me into the barrel. At that moment, I fought with him with all my might. We fought, tossing and turning. But what he was overlooking was that I am very strong. After a long fight, I picked him up from the ground and put him in the barrel, and he fell inside head first. He screamed and writhed himself, which didn't last more than 3 seconds, and I didn't have to look inside to find out what happened to him. I ran away like crazy. I couldn't even call the police and stayed home for several days, trembling. About 3 days passed since then, and I couldn't do anything, trembling in fear, and decided to go back to his house after all. His door was still open as it was when I left his house, and the house was full of bizarre smoke and a strange smell. When I went down to the basement and approached the barrel, there were parts of his body that had melted and were hard to recognize. I freaked out and ran away. I considered concealing everything, but eventually decided to report it to the police. Investigations revealed that he had already killed about 3 people. Several barrels filled with the sulfuric acid were found in his house, with human hair and pieces of bones inside. And a notebook was found in his room on which he was writing a horror novel. The process of how he lured people and put them into the sulfuric acid barrel was written in detail. And the following content of the novel was about putting me in a barrel of sulfuric acid. It said that a few days after killing me, he missed me and tried to take my body back out, but my body had already melted and disappeared. I was shocked. The police asked me if I had an argument with him recently, but there was no such thing. I still can't understand why he did those things. Did he really do all that to write his horror novel?
This is a story from when my grandmother was in her 20s. She is now in her 80s, but has surprisingly beautiful skin. Whenever I complimented her on her beautiful skin,
she would tell me this chilling story. Now, let's narrate the story from my grandmother's perspective. In my early 20s, I worked as a maid in a grand mansion of a wealthy family. There were a total of 5 maids, and I was the youngest when I first started. However, all the maids working there had pale skin and looked sickly. At first, I didn't think much of it and brushed it off, but as time went on, things started getting stranger. The maids would collapse one by one every day, and I could clearly sense that something was happening to them, but they wouldn't say anything to me. Then, one day, the lady of the house called me into the shower room. When I went inside, I was so shocked I almost fell backward. She was bathing in a bathtub filled with red liquid. The smell of blood from that moment is still vivid in my memory. She quietly said, "Shall I reveal the secret to my beauty?" By the way, she was in her 50s at the time, but had an unbelievably youthful face. She asked me to come closer, and from within the bathtub, she took out a syringe and pierced it into my arm, drawing blood. I tried to resist, but I was too scared to move. She took my blood and sprayed it all over her body, all the while exclaiming in admiration, "Ah, it's refreshing." Then she looked into my eyes and said, "I'll double your salary this month. Come to the bathroom again next week." I couldn't muster a response. As I hesitated, she held the syringe close to my neck and asked, "Should I finish it all today?" I had no choice but to agree. I wanted to run away, but I couldn't refuse the large sum of money she was offering. At that time, my family was very poor, and I couldn't earn that much money anywhere else. Eventually, I continued to give her my blood periodically. She said that many rich people were taking blood baths, so she wasn't the only one doing it. However, one day, she was found dead in the bathtub. The police arrived with the screams of the maids, and when they saw her body was blue, and the police said that there was not a drop of blood left in her entire body. There were dozens of holes punctured all over her body, and it was speculated that someone had drained all her blood at once. Strangely, the police never found the culprit. No evidence was discovered whatsoever. Of course, all the maids had alibis. After that, the case of her death remained unsolved. To this day, nobody knows who killed her. But you know, I actually know the answer. I was the last person she called into the bathroom before she died.
At 3 a.m., after tossing and turning in bed, I went out to the porch of the living room to light up a cigarette. It was late at night, so all the lights in the apartment across the street were off, but only one house, right across from my house, had lights on. Inside, a man and a woman were standing, facing each other, and I could faintly hear high-pitched voices as if they were arguing. Soon after, they started fighting, and after a while, the man lifted the woman up off the ground and threw her out the window. Letting out a horrible shriek, the woman fell to the floor with her long hair fluttering, and then I heard a bang. I was so startled that I climbed up on the railing and looked down, and the woman was lying dead on the cement floor, looking horrible with her skull broken. The man on the opposite side who pushed the woman also was looking down from the railing, and when he raised his head, he met my eyes. Surprisingly, the man looked exactly the same as me. I was so shocked that I gasped, and the man looked at me in surprise and shouted something, but I couldn't hear his voice well. Is this the doppelganger that I've only heard about? I can't believe my doppelganger is a murderer. I was so shocked that I collapsed right on the spot, my legs giving out.
Alex, what's wrong?
At the moment, my wife, Charlotte, who was sleeping in the bedroom, came running to help me up. A man in the apartment across the street just threw a woman out of the window and killed her.
Really?
Charlotte was startled and went out to the porch to check. Don't go outside! The culprit is looking at our house now, I said urgently, pulling her by the wrist. I hid behind the curtains and called the police with my hand trembling. The man living in the apartment across the street killed a woman by throwing her out the window. Please, come quickly. After a while, the police arrived, and the woman's body, who had been dead with her skull broken, was nowhere to be found. And when they searched the house across the street, people other than the man I had just seen were living inside.
Hey, what is all this? Even kids don't make prank calls these days. This is clearly obstruction of justice.
That can't be true.
Everyone withdraw.
I stood there, confused by the situation, when my wife, Charlotte, came up to me and said,
You've been under a lot of stress lately because of the promotion exam. So you must have seen things for a second.
No, I saw a woman falling from the terrace of that house, and I saw her dead body on the floor with her skull broken clearly with my own eyes. And when she fell, I also heard a loud thud.
If it was that loud, I would have woken up since I'm a light sleeper. I'm telling you, stress is this dangerous. Honey, calm down and have some green tea. Here.
As usual, my wife handed me warm, brewed green tea. As she said, my health had been deteriorated due to stress lately, and I was diagnosed with liver and kidney problems during our checkup recently. The vision I had seen that night was so vividly embedded in my head that I had nightmares of it for a long time. The face of a man who looked just like me, the corpse of a woman with a broken skull, the movement of the man's lips shouting something at me. What was he shouting? 7 years later. The abdominal pain with no known cause that continued on for 4 days seemed to subside, but today I was suffering from a high fever. My liver and kidneys, which have always not been good, were now so damaged that they could hardly function properly, disrupting my daily life. I was sure that I was slowly dying from the moment my eyes met the killers who looked just like me 7 years ago. I've heard that when you meet a doppelganger, one of them will die. I thought that maybe the murderer I saw that day might not be an illusion, but my real doppelganger. Watching me lose my vitality day by day, Charlotte cried often. She did not give up on me and often took me to the hospital where she worked as a nurse for a thorough examination, but the cause of my illness was unknown. If I die, poor Charlotte will be alone. Charlotte's beautiful eyes, soft hair, calming voice, and even the warmth of green tea she gave me every day. My heart ached at the thought that there were not many days left to be with her. I recently quit my job. I got sick and couldn't work anymore. As a result, Charlotte became the breadwinner instead of me, and she had to increase her hospital hours in order to get paid overtime. I felt so sorry for Charlotte, but the pain made me helpless, and trying to fall asleep lying in bed during most of my time was all I could do. Then one day, I was looking for painkillers for the severe abdominal pain that started again, but I was running out of medicine at home, so I couldn't take them. I suddenly thought that if I drank green tea that Charlotte prepared for me every day, I would feel a little better, so I headed to the kitchen, grabbing onto my stomach. I hadn't done any kitchen work due to my busy work life, so I had to look for the green tea bag for quite a while because I didn't know where it was. And when I finally found a green tea bag in the corner of the cupboard and steeped it in warm water and drank it, I was startled. It tasted different from the green tea I had been drinking before. I thought there was a separate green tea I'd been having, so I searched the kitchen again when I ran into an automotive antifreeze hidden behind things piled up in the cupboard. Why is automotive antifreeze in the kitchen? It was something I had never seen before, which wasn't the one I had been using in my garage. Suddenly, Charlotte's strange behavior a few days ago when she entered the kitchen and hurriedly took me out of the kitchen flashed across my mind. No way. At that moment, I had a spine-chilling sensation, and a feeling of foreboding overcame me. With trembling hands, I put a few drops of automotive antifreeze into the green tea that I had brewed and carefully tried a bit. Horrifyingly, it tasted the same as the green tea that Charlotte had been giving me. I went to another hospital, not the one where Charlotte worked, and received medical treatment. The doctor was surprised to see my condition and explained that my liver and kidneys were damaged due to taking in an ingredient called ethylene glycol, which is used as an automotive antifreeze. The doctor said that after taking it for such a long time, my organs were ruined and the central nervous system was seriously damaged. He said it was no longer possible to recover. This was a diagnosis I had never gotten when I went to the hospital where Charlotte worked as a nurse for the past 7 years. I was told for 7 years that the cause cannot be identified. Can it be possible to not know even after undergoing a checkup?
If you've gotten through a thorough medical checkup, they would have been able to find out. But I don't understand.
I was able to know by intuition that Charlotte and the doctor working at her workplace were on the same side. That night, Charlotte, as always, came into our bedroom after her night shift, offered me green tea, and I said I'll drink it later. When she left, I went into the bedroom bathroom and poured the green tea down the drain. After checking that Charlotte went into the dressing room and closed the door, I crept up and put my ear to the door, and I found that Charlotte was whispering in a low voice, talking to someone on the phone.
He's going to die in 2 or 3 months at most, right? I've got a lot of death insurance for my husband, so the amount will be considerable. Thanks for waiting a long time, honey. See you at the hospital tomorrow.
I was so surprised that I covered my mouth with my hand and hurried back to the bedroom. Meanwhile, I was dying slowly, not from the doppelganger's curse, but at the hand of Charlotte. I was lying in bed and pretending to be asleep. As soon as Charlotte, who had finished getting ready for bed, entered the bedroom, I heard the sound of her fiddling with the cup on the table, as if checking to see if I had drunk green tea. Then, after a while, as she laid her body next to the bed, I started to hear her roughly breathing, as if she had fallen asleep right away. With Charlotte lying next to me, I got goosebumps and came to my senses. Should I report it to the police right away, or should I start with collecting evidence? I eventually chose the most foolish way. After much thought, I decided to directly ask Charlotte what made her decide to kill me. It seemed that I could understand this unbelievable situation only if I heard it directly from the woman I love. I woke Charlotte from her sleep at dawn and called her into the living room. Charlotte looked puzzled with a half-awake face. Charlotte, I've loved you with all my heart, all my life, but why are you trying to kill me? At my question, Charlotte replied with a panicked face.
Honey, what are you talking about?
I know you've been feeding me automotive antifreeze. At my words, Charlotte put on an innocent expression and insisted that she has no idea what I'm talking about. It's too late to make excuses. If I ask the police to get your call history with your co-conspirator, the doctor you've been having an affair with, your crime will be revealed soon. Then Charlotte, who suddenly took on a horrid look, said,
You weren't a loving husband. You neglected me for a long time because you only worked like a dog. I didn't want to live with you anymore.
Then we could get divorced. There's no need to murder me.
I needed your insurance money. A job as a nurse cannot be a lifetime job.
You bitch!
Alex, you're going to die soon. You'll hate me, but think of it as your karma for neglecting me and forgive me. At least the remaining people should be well off. If you loved me with all your heart, you could at least do that for me, right?
What? Enraged, I rushed at Charlotte, grabbed her by the throat, and shook her violently. And in response, Charlotte slapped my face. At that moment, I lost control of myself, and I picked her up from the ground, ran out to the terrace where the door was open, and threw her out the window.
Alex, no. Put me down. Put me down. No. Ah!
Charlotte let out a shriek and fell from the 11th floor, followed by a great crash. Shocked, I climbed onto the railing and looked down at where Charlotte had fallen. She was dead, her skull shattered on the cement floor. Only then did I realize that the murderer I saw on the terrace 7 years ago was not a doppelganger. I had seen the future of me today, ahead of time. I slowly raised my head with bloodshot eyes and looked straight forward, and my eyes met those of a man standing on the terrace of the apartment across the street, and that was me, 7 years ago. I shouted at him with all my might, "Kill Charlotte!" Then, in an instant, my voice dissipated feebly through the air and evaporated. The man was surprised when he saw my face and plopped down to the ground, and I could only watch helplessly from afar, Charlotte running out of the room to help him up.
My name is Anika, and I am from Kolkata, India. This is the story of the man who might have been trying to steal my soul as I slept. So one day I had a dream about a guy who was in his mid-30s. I had never seen this person in real life before. In the dream, he lived in the countryside. I don't know why I was there, but he took me into his home, and his family was there. He lived with his sister, her little baby boy, and his mother. While we were in his home, he proposed to me while talking about our future together. He was especially enthusiastic about the details of us doing the usual marital activities together. I told him I wouldn't marry him and ran out of the house. I ran through the countryside to get away from this guy, but he kept chasing me. That's when I woke up. I had never had this dream before, but from that day forward, I would see this guy in my dreams every now and then. I started noticing that whenever I would feel depressed about my relationship status, this guy would appear again in my dreams. It was always the same guy. I started to think that this guy was my soulmate. I'm a very spiritual person. I thought that this person might also be spiritual, and our dreams are where we can connect. I decided to tell my mother about the guy in my dreams, thinking she might provide me with some insight as to why it was always the same guy or what might be going on. She didn't care at all. I would soon find out the true nature of this guy and why he might have been in my dreams. A few days after telling my mother about this guy, I was talking to my friend, Sneha. We were talking about the random nonsense that girls talk about together. Suddenly, she brings up dreams. She tells me about a guy who she dreamt of that wanted to kiss her. I got goosebumps. I was shocked. I hadn't told her about the guy from my dreams yet. I needed to know more. I asked her for more details. Where does he live? What does he look like? Every detail that she gave matched exactly. He lived in the countryside. He was tall. His skin was a darker complexion. He had a thin mustache. This had to be the same guy from my dreams. That's when I told her everything. I told her all about my dreams and the guy within them, and that I think he shows up in my dreams when I'm depressed about being single. When I told her this, she looked shocked. That's when things started to get weird. She told me that the first time she saw this guy was the night her boyfriend broke up with her. I had chills. This guy cannot be a normal guy. He has to be someone with supernatural powers. Only it's not the same as the heroes in the movies. This guy uses some kind of supernatural powers to seduce the souls of girls while they sleep, in order to have fun with them, and he enjoys it. He targets depressed girls, and my friend and I were not the only ones he would target. I found news from 2006 where a psychiatrist had taken the time to sketch a man who had begun repeatedly showing up in her dreams. It was someone she did not know in real life. I found other reports online of other people that claimed to have seen the same person under the same circumstances. When I found this, I was shaking. I felt like I was part of something unbelievable, yet it was happening to so many others. Reports of this guy appearing in dreams continued to surface until 2008. Is it true? Does this guy really exist? Did he stop because he found someone to love, or is he dead? I'll probably never know the truth, but I am glad I said no and ran away from him. If he truly was able to control dreams like that, who knows what sinister things he had planned if I had said yes.
Recently, I went to a party with my friends and ran into someone familiar. Where have I seen him? I couldn't remember. But after a while, I remembered. He was Max, a friend who was bullied 10 years ago in middle school. Right at that moment, I got goosebumps. This was because his past, when he was always bullied by kids as he was clumsy, did not match his current appearance at all. His appearance now was that of a sturdy man. I carefully called out, "Max?" He replied, grinning broadly. "Do you remember me now? I was about to strike you in the head because I thought you don't remember me." "Good to see you, Jack." His voice was powerful, and I could feel that he was strong as he put his arm around me. I got goosebumps. He said he had something he wanted to show me, and asked me to go somewhere with him. I was reluctant at first, but I was going somewhere with him before I knew it. I got into his car, and after a while, we arrived at a shabby house in a remote place. "Max, is this your house?" He suddenly got back to his appearance of how he used to be when in middle school and shouted with a childlike face and voice. "Jack, do you remember what I said to you before?" "What, that you said I'm handsome?" "No, not that. I said I wanted to cut off the kid's hands." It came to mind. When we were in middle school, he would always say that crying after being beaten by kids. I answered, "I do remember. Why?" Then he shouted as he jumped up and down, "I really cut them all." He guided me into the basement in his house. When he opened the door to the basement and went down, several men were sitting there, stunned, both with hands severed. Looking closely, they were all of the guys who bullied Max in middle school. As soon as they saw me, they shouted, "Help!" I screamed. Then Max said, "I love my friends, but they beat me up a lot. But they don't anymore. I'm so happy." I felt that I was going to vomit. When I turned around, I realized that Max was already holding a hammer and an axe in each hand. He told me, "Jack, why didn't you save me back then? You just watched me from afar while I was being beaten by these guys. I wanted to pull your eyes out." I started shaking and told Max to calm down. Then he said, "Let's play rock, paper, scissors, Jack. If I win, I'll pull out your eyes. And if you win, I'll grant you a wish." I played rock, paper, scissors, shaking, and fortunately I won. Then he let out a deep breath and asked me what my wish is, and I asked him to set them free. He shouted, "I can't. I have to hang out with my friends." I kept begging him, and he replied after pondering, "Okay, since they can't play rock, paper, scissors because they don't have hands, if you win instead, I'll let them go. But if I win, I'll do whatever I want." We played rock, paper, scissors again, and this time I lost. Then he hit one of the guys in the neck with an axe. With a loud scream, he fell to the floor and died. "What are you doing?" I shrieked, and Max said, "This was something I wanted to show you about myself, how I beat them up. You always had seen me suffering." At that moment, the other guy suddenly ran up and shouted, grasping Max's body, "Jack, now! Attack!" When Max was bewildered, I ran over and struck him with all of my might, and he fell down to the ground in pain. Then I jumped on top of Max and punched him in the face recklessly. He cried out in pain, "Ah! I'm going to have to cut off your hands too, Jack!" As I continued to punch him, he almost lost consciousness, and I called the police. The police arrived shortly and were shocked by the brutality of the scene and arrested Max. It turned out that Max had taken revenge on a total of 4 of his friends. 2 of them had their hands cut off, 1 had his tongue cut out, and 1 had his feet cut off. And Max had imprisoned them there and played with them every day. This incident made me suffer extreme trauma. I've had nightmares about Max pulling my eyes out every night since then. Then, one day, I had a dream about the days of middle school. In my dream, Max was being beaten by kids. However, his appearance was that of the present as an adult. And the kids who beat him had no hands. I screamed. Then Max looked at me and said, "Jack, when I get out of prison, I'm going to gouge out your eyes and then cut off your hands. Then let's all hang out together." I had a roommate named Michael, but one day a strange rotten smell started to come from his room. So I told him, "Michael, your room smells of something rotten. If you have a nose, you can smell it too, right?" Then he shouted, "Your nose must have been rotten," and slammed the door. I was puzzled, not only because of the smell, but also because Michael's personality seems to have changed. One day at 3 in the morning, he shouted very loudly in his room, "You are more beautiful than a goddess. I will do anything that you want me to." I didn't understand what he was doing, so I knocked on the door, and then he yelled inside, "Don't bother me now, Steve. I didn't bother you when you were with your girlfriend." I was so confused. So one day, when he wasn't home, I decided to secretly open his room. I found the key and opened his door. His room was neat and tidy and nothing seemed out of place. But the moment I looked in the mirror, there was a woman standing behind me, staring at me. I was so surprised and looked around, but no one was there. Then I heard the woman's voice in my ear.
Do you want to play with me?
Then, along with a rotten smell, I felt a hand running down my neck. Startled, I looked in the mirror again and saw a rotten skeleton beside me, touching me and whispering. I screamed and ran out of the room. I was so scared, but there was nothing I could do, and I couldn't hear anyone in the room. The next morning, when I opened the room again, there was no sign, and I didn't have the courage to look at the mirror. So I just shut the door. I was confused whether I was dreaming or seeing things. When Michael came back home later, I asked him what the hell was going on in the room. He pretended that he doesn't know anything at first, but eventually he began to tell the truth. What was shocking was that he had practiced necromancy one day out of curiosity, and a stunning female spirit appeared. So he didn't send her back and let her live in his room. I didn't believe him and told him not to lie, but when he took me to his room to show her to me, the room was obviously empty. But when he said, "Cassandra," I suddenly heard someone walking in on the ceiling, and with the feeling of someone's hair touching my head, the room started to reek of something rotten. I couldn't even look up and ran out of the room screaming. Since then, her voice was heard from time to time in Michael's room. I kept thinking what I should do about this, but Michael seemed so happy, and I thought there would be no harm to me since it was what happened in their room. But one thing that gave me goosebumps was what Michael always said by habit. "I will become one with you, Cassandra!" He started to lock himself in his room, not coming out for days, and I started to become worried about him. Then one day, he hadn't been out of the room for so long that I knocked on the door, but there was no answer. I eventually opened his door and I was startled. He was lying on the bed and his body had swelled twice as large as if there was something inside him. I screamed and called the police. When the police arrived and checked, he was already dead and his body was filled with black liquid. As a result of the autopsy, the liquid inside his body was found to be rotten blood, but no evidence was found of whose blood it was or where it came from. After Michael's death, I was lost in grief. Recently, I started dating someone new and stayed with her at my house. But the strange thing was that she kept saying this to me these days.
I want to become one with you.
Then she clung to me and hugged me tight. I suddenly got goosebumps and pushed her away, but she kept coming over to me, repeating the same words over and over again. I indulged in her moderation, but as time passed, it got worse. Now she holds me tight and keeps telling me that she wants to be with me for 24 hours so that we can become one. What should I do now?
Late at night, I took the apartment elevator bound to the first floor to buy some cigarettes. The elevator stopped on the 6th floor, and the door opened. A woman was standing there, who was thin, with sunken cheeks, tangled hair, and dark circles under her vacant eyes. When I saw the woman's feet, I was startled because she was barefooted. The woman stepped into the elevator as she grasped her stomach as if she was in pain, with her head down. I glanced at her, holding my breath, staying as far away as possible from her because of her dirty appearance. She looked around the elevator floor for a long time with her head down, as if she had lost something. The strange thing was that she kept on looking around even though there was nothing on the floor. I got out of the elevator quickly, avoiding her. Feeling unsettled, when I pressed the elevator button to go up to my house after buying cigarettes, that woman was now lying on her stomach and looking around the floor. I hesitated for a moment as I was scared of the woman, but got into the elevator. When I pressed on the 9th floor button, the door closed and started to go up. But the elevator stopped on the 6th floor, even though nobody had pressed on the 6th floor button. When the door opened, the woman who was lying on the floor, face down, crawled out of the elevator. Shocked by the bizarre scene I had never seen before, I spent the whole day speculating about the identity of the woman on the 6th floor. I could only come to a conclusion that she was a deranged homeless woman who broke into the apartment. A few days later, at dawn, even before sunrise, I took the elevator for a morning jog. 9, 8, 7, 6. The elevator stopped at the 6th floor, and the door opened, and a man with messy hair and dirty clothes got onto the elevator with his head down. But what was surprising was that the man was barefoot, just like the woman I saw a few days ago. The man was grasping his belly, just like the woman, and looked around the floor as if he were looking for something. I was so curious about what they were looking for that I risked my fears to talk to the man. "Excuse me, what are you looking for?" At my question, the man who was looking around the floor looked at me, raising his eyes. His blank eyes and his creepy-looking face sent chills down my spine. He glared at me and whispered, "I lost something. My stomach hurts." The man blurted out incomprehensible words, lied face down on the ground, and began stumbling around, looking for something. I got out of the elevator terrified, thinking hard about what would be the relationship between the man and the woman I had seen the other day. The woman also took the elevator from the 6th floor, and the man also took the elevator from the same floor. Both were like homeless people, barefoot, grasping their own stomachs as if they were in pain, and lying on the ground, searching for something. I guessed that they must be a strange couple living on the 6th floor, so I went straight to the apartment management office and asked, "Hello, I'm Michael living in room 902. Is there a strange couple living on the 6th floor? There's a barefooted man and woman who take the elevator from the 6th floor. They were like homeless people. They looked so thin and dirty." "A couple? Hold on a moment." The janitor looked over the list of tenants and said, "There's no couple living on the 6th floor." If the couple doesn't live on the 6th floor, who the heck are they? Frustrated, I took out the bill for the 6th floor from the mailbox where the maintenance fee bills are delivered and discovered a very strange bill. There were 2 households on the 6th floor, 601 and 602. The water bill for room 601 was $35 a month, and the water bill for room 602 was $620. What is this? How can the water bill be over $600 a month? I began to doubt room 602 at the number that couldn't be understood. All sorts of strange things must have been happening on the 6th floor of this apartment. A few days after that, I was heading to the elevator as usual, but the elevator that arrived on the 1st floor was about to close. I hurriedly ran over and pressed on the open button, and inside were 2 big, tough-looking men. I glanced at them and tried to press on the button, and I found that the 6th floor button was pressed. Room 602? They were carrying a large golf bag, and there was a strange, fishy smell coming from it. Eventually, when the elevator arrived on the 6th floor, the men got off the elevator carrying the heavy-looking bag together, and I sneaked out in front of the elevator door to make sure they were entering room 602. Then, I went back to the elevator, and I found small drops of blood on the spot where they had put the golf club bag. Barefooted homeless people, water bills over $600, a golf club bag covered with blood. After returning home, I thought about it for a long time, and eventually called the police and told them everything I had seen on the 6th floor. Shortly after, the dispatch police searched room 602 thoroughly. What was horrifying was that the house had been converted into an operating room. In the freezer, they found 2 dismembered bodies with all the organs removed, and found one body of a boy who died just a few hours ago in a golf bag. It turned out that the men in room 602 were members of an organization that specialized in organ trafficking, and after kidnapping and killing people, they invited a doctor to their house to remove their organs. The unbelievable amount billed was due to a great amount of water used to dispose the blood from the corpse. I asked the police if they had seen any homeless people during the search in room 602. "Have you seen any homeless people walking around barefoot? A man and a woman?" "No, we haven't seen any homeless people." "I'm sure I ran into them in the elevator." "Then let's check the CCTV footage. Follow me." We watched the apartment elevator CCTV, and surprisingly, on both dates I saw the homeless, I was filmed alone in an empty elevator. I was so shocked to see the video of myself asking, What are you looking for? Staring emptily into space. No! I saw it with my own eyes. Am I seeing things? 3 days later, an autopsy on the corpses in the freezer dismembered in pieces revealed that they were an unidentified adult female corpse and an adult male corpse. The police said the victims were probably homeless, seeing that their fingerprints were not registered. Then who were the homeless people I saw in the elevator? By any chance, were they the ghosts of people whose organs were removed in room 602? Were they wandering around, peering into the elevator floor in search of their missing organs? This story is on behalf of my friend. He was too scared to send it in because he's scared someone might find him. This story took place in 2020 in Seoul, South Korea. My name is Asahi for the time being, and I went to live in Korea with my wife, or at least that's what we were planning on. In the first few months of living there, I started working as a police officer. I got along with the other officers very well. I had a best friend named Yeonji who was very superior to the rest of us. I was told that he resolved 21 crimes in just 6 months by himself. He was like an older brother to all of us. I realized he had missing pinky fingers, but I brushed it off, thinking it was just a disability. A year later, during September 2021, Yeonji retired as a police officer. I thought to myself that he had just found a better job or just wanted to live a life normally, but that wasn't the case. A month later, December 2021, me and a few other police officers were having a party to celebrate one of our senior sergeant's birthday. After drinking a lot, I was watching TV upstairs, away from the others. There was a news broadcast, and the news reporter said in Korean, 24-year-old criminal Yeonji Sung is reported on the loose after conflict between 2 rival gangs. If you see this man, please report immediately. Of course, I didn't believe what was going on. Honestly, I thought I was just too drunk to think straight, but all that changed in just a few hours. As time went past, it was approximately 2:30 a.m., and everyone was gassed out. It was then until I heard knocking from the front door. I couldn't be bothered to answer it, so one of the other officers opened it. A gunshot went off. All of us instantly woke up to it. As I looked towards the door, I saw the officer who opened the door, dripping with blood. As my vision became clearer, I saw a man around 6 foot 7 inches standing at the door. Of course, it may sound stupid, but all of us ran towards him. The man dropped his gun and judo threw one of the officers. He then began to beat the shit out of all of us. It was an unfair fight. I'd say it was about 1 versus 17. I could tell the man was trained in some sort of martial art. One of the other officers grabbed a bottle of beer and smashed it on his head. I was going to try and take him down, but then he put me in some sort of jiu-jitsu choke. I was out cold. I woke up on a hospital bed with my wife next to me. What happened? I said to myself. My wife then began to tell me everything. It was said that the man who attacked me yesterday was Yeonji, my own best friend. My wife also mentioned that Yeonji was a former Yakuza member who was caught for drug dealing in Japan. He then smuggled onto a boat to Korea. It was at that moment that I realized why he had missing pinky fingers. I was told that some Yakuza members that commit serious offenses must atone by cutting their pinkies off. This was known as Yobitsume, and apparently his name, Yeonjing Sung, was just an alias so that he wouldn't be caught. Although none of us found out his real name, we found out about his life before, being a Yakuza. We were told that he was a good martial artist who was a black belt in Jiu-Jitsu, Taekwondo, and Judo. 2022. After this encounter, my wife and I moved back to the US. I farewelled my fellow police officers and asked them to keep safe. Even to this day, I wonder how Yeonji is going. This story took place in Sylhet, Bangladesh, and was experienced by my uncle, who was around 20 at the time. My uncle and 4 of my other cousins went on a fishing trip, and by the time they started making their way back to the village, it was getting dark. As there is very little street lighting in the rural areas of Bangladesh, and the journey back home was a few hours' distance, they decided to set up camp and continue their journey the following day. They decided that 2 members of the group would stay awake for 3 hours each and then rotate to keep watch over the fish and equipment as well as their own safety. My uncle was in the first group to sleep, so after 3 hours, he and one of my other cousins woke up to keep watch while the others slept. The cousin who was meant to keep watch with my uncle at the time was feeling very drowsy. My uncle requested that he got some rest and he could keep watch by himself. While keeping watch, my uncle heard a sound coming from nearby bushes and trees. Assuming it was a stray animal attracted to the fish, he went with his stick and poked the bushes, and the sound stopped. When he turned away, he heard the sound again and was curious as to what it was and where it was coming from. He went through the bushes and found a small clearing with a very tall tree. On further observation, my uncle noticed a figure of a woman sitting at the top of the tree. She had long, dark hair, which cascaded all the way down to the bottom of the trunk. She had pale skin and was of a thin build. My uncle, who is a quick thinker, grabbed the woman's hair, as he knew she was not a human being, but a jinn. Jinn refers to a ghost or demon commonly seen in rural Bangladesh, and he knew if he did not act fast, he and the others were not going to make it to the morning. A jinn's hair is its weak point, and if a person can grab hold of it, the jinn is powerless and cannot harm the person. The woman instantly screamed when he grabbed her hair and started pulling away, but my uncle clenched his fist and did not let go. He knew if he did, he would regret it. The jinn begged and pleaded with him and said she would make him rich and powerful if he let her hair go. But my uncle clung on with all his strength. After a long time, the jinn gave up, and my uncle, who was really exhausted, fell asleep with his hands still clenched on the jinn's hair. He woke up in the morning and found all my cousins surrounding him, staring at him, looking very confused. When he looked up at them and asked why they were surrounding him, they pointed at his hand. He looked down and saw a dead crow in his hand, jet black, like the jinn's hair he had been holding on to all night long. This story took place a few years ago when I was working at my old job in London, England. I was a manager there, and the company I worked for helped people gain skills and find employment. A woman came into the office, and the receptionist had her fill out the application form to complete the course. Part of the registration was made up of an initial assessment on the computer, which would determine the level the person was working at, so we could see their strengths and weaknesses. The woman was sat at the computer, staring at a blank screen for a long time, and it was getting late. As the office was closing shortly, the receptionist asked the woman if she is happy to come back at a later date to finish the assessment. The woman did not respond and continued to stare at the blank computer screen. The receptionist then came to me and asked if I could speak to the woman and inform her that we are closing the office. I went over to her and asked if she's okay and let her know that we are closing shortly. She asked if she could speak to me privately. I accepted and took her into my office. The woman opened up and started talking to me about how her husband recently died and that he often visits her, especially at night. I thought these claims were extremely strange. I found myself just nodding and making minimal conversation as I wanted to get out of the office and enjoy the rest of my day. The woman then said something which made me freeze. She said her husband was now in the office with us. I noticed her looking over my shoulder, and I instantly felt the room get colder. I could feel sweat on my forehead, and my hand was trembling. I had never been so scared in my life. I quickly texted the receptionist under the desk and told her to come to the room and say there had been an emergency and I needed to leave. She listened, and the receptionist came to the room and told me I have an important phone call I couldn't miss, to which the woman replied, she is happy to wait for me. I told her the office is now closed and we need to leave the building as the cleaners need to come and do their job. She finally left the office, taking the coldness with her. I went to security and informed him to never let her back in if she was ever to come back, but she never did, and I never saw her again. Hi, I'm Jin, and I wanted to share this experience with you. Back when I was 6 or 7 years old, I used to not believe in ghosts or anything considered paranormal because of my mom's influence that these are just hoaxes. But that changed when we went on vacation for the very first time to my mother's hometown. It's a province. There are a lot of trees, crops, and farms. On our way there, when we got on our second ride, which is an open window bus, there was this man who was sitting behind our seat. He looked around 50 to 60 years old, and he had a cane with him. Once he had sat down, I looked at him, and he smiled at me. My mother was asleep at that time. The man gave me a candy, and as a 7-year-old kid, I took the candy and ate it. When we arrived at our destination, I said goodbye to the man, and he smiled again. Fast forward to nighttime, when we were sleeping. At around 3 to 4 a.m., I felt sick in my tummy, so I got up. And because the bathroom was outside the house, I felt scared. But none of the people in the house were awake, and I didn't want to wake them up because they were tired from the trip. I gathered all my courage and went out to the bathroom, which is at least 10 steps from the house. Though it wasn't very far, it was just really scary. It was cold, and when I got in the bathroom, I threw up, and it was green, the same color as the candy that the man gave me. Once I was done and flushed the toilet, I looked on my side, and there was someone looking at me, and the person was just smiling. Then it hit me that the person was the man who sat behind us on the bus. I got more scared when he started to call me by my name, so I ran back to the house. I woke up my mom and told her what happened. She first thought it's just because I was dreaming, because there was no way someone could have been there due to the way that the bathroom is built. The bathroom was at the edge of the land it was built on. There was only at least 4 or 5 inches on the side, so that means that the window was put there so no one could take a peek while someone's using it. My mother got out and went to the bathroom with me to reassure me that there was nothing wrong, till she saw the fingerprints on the window. She immediately called my father to check around, but he saw no one. The dogs, too, didn't even make a sound. The next morning, my mom was cleaning up and was putting up her family's pictures. One particular photo caught my eye, and it was the man who sat on the bus with us, who gave me candy, and the one who I saw on the bathroom window. I asked my mother who it was, and she said that it was her grandfather who had died years earlier, before I was born. I didn't tell her about what I thought, because it gave me the creeps. I never truly understood what had happened that day, but I remember it like it was yesterday.